right, we'll come back into Yamhill County Board of Commissioners informal and formal session for March 26th of 2020. And apologies, we were having technical difficulties with our live stream, but we got it back on. So thank you. Before we move on back into public comment, Commissioner Olson would like to say something.
Thank you very much, Commission Chair Kula. I think it's appropriate at this time that if we just take a few seconds of silence as we go through all these troubled times with the COVID virus. We also have other people that are really hurting that we take a time and a moment of silence for Commissioner Springer and his family. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. We have two other public comments besides the one from Patricia C. Mueller. One is from Bijou Harrison Doherty, and her comment is directed at workplace safety and leave at the county. And then maybe I don't see the other one. I'm sorry, Carolina. Pause for a moment. I just want to make sure we acknowledge receipt.
You have received it or you haven't?
No, I have not received it.
I'll
Sorry.
resend it.
Okay.
Oh, we have two. Is that correct?
So far.
Three?
Three, I have the two here, and then Carolina said that there was one more.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we acknowledge them since we don't have people in the room.
Did anybody get it?
I just got it right now.
I just resent it.
And this matter of public comment is a petition signed by 157 members of Yamhill County staff who are concerned about the steps being taken with regard to safety in the workplace.
Oh, here it is.
And we will move on to item D, which is the consent agenda, and we have nothing on it. And we'll move on to item E, which is old business, and we have none. And we move on to item F, which is other business. And item F1 is consideration of amendment number 7 to agreement number 159184 between Yamhill County and the Oregon Health Authority, which is board order 19-228, for the financing of community mental health, addiction treatment, recovery and prevention, and problem gambling services, retroactive to July 1st of 2019 through December 31st of 2020.
Mr. Chair, I would just move approval, and this is a standard amendment that we've had over the years.
Yes, that sounds great. Thank you, Commissioner. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Let the record show unanimous approval of item F1. Item F2 is consideration of the ratification of the temporary COVID-19 telecommuting policy, which is board order 20-91. And Ken, would you like to say anything on that? Or do commissioners have questions for Ken?
No, I read it and don't have any questions.
Okay. Thank you for your work on it.
Thank you.
We still don't seem to be live streaming.
That's what I'm worried.
I can see it.
You can?
Yeah.
Because I got an email from Nicole, she can't.
So did I.
Oh,
Carry the check and see.
maybe it stopped again, but it was gone.
But it was 7 minutes ago.
It may be the
Oh,
error.
yeah. Maybe that was when we were in our recess, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. If there,
I apologize for interrupting.
no, I actually did ask you. You kind of had the floor, commissioners, and then I would entertain a motion that approve, unless there's other comments.
I'll make a motion that we approve.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Let the record show unanimous approval of item F2. Item F3 is consideration of extending the emergency declaration for COVID-19. And you have a copy from Christian.
Yeah, I went ahead, thinking this might come up. I went ahead and prepared a brief document that you should have in front of you now. It simply extends the declaration that was adopted last week. I'd left the date blank, so if the board wanted to discuss whether or not to extend, and if so, by how long, we can fill that date in.
Are we allowed to say that it's until further notice or until rescinded by the board?
Mhm.
So we don't have to keep doing this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would go with that personally.
I agree with that because whether we extend it 3 weeks or whether we extend it a month,
Mhm.
we could be back here again. So I like the terminology
Yeah.
that it's in effect until rescinded by the board. So if there's no other case, I'll make a motion that we approve item number F3, consideration extending emergency direction for COVID-19 with the wordage insert instead of a date until rescinded by the board.
Until extended or repealed or, okay.
Okay.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Let the record show unanimous approval of item F3. Item F4 is consideration of extending the COVID-19 temporary administrative leave policy, which is Board Order 20-91, to April 2nd of 2020. And if you, please, commissioners, if you have questions, but Ken and Christian, would you like to weigh in on this before we ask?
Well, the original admin leave policy that was adopted ran concurrent with the declared emergency with the term date.
Right.
As you know, you may have seen the email. We're currently still working on the policy, but on April 1st, a new federal an expansion of FMLA goes into effect. So we wanted to get your input on whether or not you wanted the admin leave policy to continue with the state of emergency, or if it should end with the new federal legislation that comes in.
Yeah.
Recognizing that the federal legislation has more eligibility, expanded eligibility than the admin leave. But I would put out there, the federal legislation, basically there's a minimum to meet at that point, and it also runs concurrent. It runs with family medical leave, FMLA, or so there could be some limitations if there's folks that have already been using some of their FMLA entitlement. So it is something that with this admin leave, it's pretty specific. It's COVID specific diagnosis or absences or caring for somebody with COVID. And so I just wanted to put the question out to the board because this was one that was actually adopted prior to the emergency. And if you wanted to continue it, I felt like this one would be better for the board to weigh in on at this point on what you want to do with the admin leave policy.
Thank you, commissioners.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So Ken, I have a question. So as far as the overlap with the admin leave policy and the new legislation, what are we looking at as far as a gap, as far as a deficiency, let's say in one or the other? Oh, in other words, what we had in place first.
Great, good question.
The admin leave policy was more restrictive as far as the categories go as far as eligibility to access that leave, because it was really for absences specific to where you have to have a doctor's note that says that you've been ordered quarantined because of suspicion of COVID-19 or you're caring for somebody on that same circumstance. This gap, what this could assist with, if you have somebody who an employee who has a COVID diagnosis but may have already used their FMLA entitlement, this still provides that additional, because
Oh, yeah.
under the federal paid leave, there's two different, and it's rather complicated, and we'll be bringing the policy before you next week.
Yep.
But there's two categories for that. There's COVID-related illnesses, caretaker symptoms, and it provides 80 hours of leave, 80 hours of paid sick leave. And it does not count against any accrued FET, vacation, or sick time that an employee may have. This is 80 hours of sick leave for that time. The other category is for the school closure, and that was the expansion of FMLA for paid leave. And again, there's some, there's some further limitations that are built into it as far as caps on payout and on what we're required to pay and requirements on whether it's a full paycheck or 2/3. That could run for a full 12 weeks, depending on the employees, on how quickly they get to that cap with the policy. And that one is more for school closures. And I think that one doesn't have the medical documentation or the the additional information required under the paid sick leave.
Yeah.
We didn't have the school closure included in the admin leave. Again, that one was strictly for that COVID. So what that leave could do is additional time that would cover someone who may have exhausted their, maybe they had in the last couple of months a medical issue that limited that they've used their family medical leave or may be close to exhausting that if they were to get, again, under the same conditions, a COVID-related diagnosis or quarantine, they would still have access to this. As far as actual numbers, how many employees, I don't have that information that may fall into that category.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if I answered your question. I gave a really long answer just because we've been spending all week trying to get through the federal legislation. And we, just to clarify for everyone that's watching, the notice that we posted yesterday was we're required under federal regulation to post that like the other employee related leave laws and other things that we post. And so that was the posting that we did. We're still working on and drafting the policy.
I have a question about when we talk about unfunded mandates at the state level, we know we do have some recourse and we don't at the federal level.
Yeah.
So how would this impact the county if we had them concurrently running? In other words, if we didn't rescind this and then we had the new federal legislation, how would that impact the county if they were running together?
If it was running together, if you had someone who was out that was not taking the school closure leave, but they were taking the leave because they have maybe a COVID diagnosis or they have a doctor's note that says that they have to quarantine due to COVID. This would basically, you would have the 80 hours of FMLA paid sick leave that you could access and the admin leave that you could access. They wouldn't run at the same time.
Okay.
But there's still a lot to it. And
So just sort of ballpark, if you have these running concurrently, what are we looking at in terms of the numbers of weeks, hours, if they were to run together, that an employee would be eligible for these leaves?
12 weeks. If you look at, if you have somebody who's necessarily, is coming in because this is an expansion of FEMLA. And so FEMLA and OFLA is 12 weeks. Typically, pre-COVID, your FEMLA and OFLA is 12 weeks protected time. There wasn't paid leave associated with that. So in this case, ultimately, you have 12 weeks of coverage, except for the hours limitation for the paid sick leave and the admin leave is, again, the board approved a policy that's 14 days.
Okay. Thank you.
My kind of follow-up question to Commissioner Sterritz, and also I want to remember that I don't know if they hopefully they communicated to you that in the bill it excluded funding to political subdivisions.
Correct.
And I think that there's a plan to integrate that into a possible subsequent bill, is what I was hearing. But my question then would be, can we? So it seems like there's likely to be some people, if we let the temporary administrative leave policy lapse after April 2nd, it sounds like there may be some people who've already expended their FEMLA. Is that correct?
There could be. I don't have
okay.
data, and
Yeah.
it's not something that I,
Yeah.
usually won't look into. I mean,
Yeah.
all FEMLA and OFLA is handled by HR.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is an expansion of FEMLA that allows for, that requires paid leave.
Yeah.
And adds categories to FEMLA specifically for COVID-19, for the school closures, and then also the paid sick leave.
So my question, I'd like to follow up to that is, I would be concerned if we dropped the admin leave policy as of April 2nd. I mean, I'm for sure for extending it to April 2nd, but then past that, I wonder, will there be people who won't be eligible for FEMLA who would otherwise be covered by the temporary COVID leave policy, that if we dropped it?
I believe the temporary COVID administrative leave policy also said that it ran concurrent with FEMLA OFLA.
It runs concurrent with FEMLA OFLA as far
Okay.
as the 12 weeks go, but
Yeah.
again,
But eligibility, yeah.
but not all. As an example, so I'm an employee. I
Yeah.
get a diagnosis with COVID. I get told to quarantine. The new law, I would be covered for 80 hours of paid sick leave.
Right.
Now, I still have, and let's say I haven't used any FMLA.
Yeah.
I would still have 12 weeks of FMLA.
Right.
But that first 2 weeks or that 80 hours for the first part, I would be paid. And then it'd be my responsibility, whether it's unpaid or FET or sick leave or some other form.
Mhm.
What the paid administrative leave could do is potentially, I qualify for this, I have 80 hours covered here. I could possibly use 80 hours of paid administrative leave if I'm still in that quarantine
Yeah.
or in that where I'm unable to to give that coverage until I get an alter to return to work.
Okay.
Again, it works more closely because based on how the temporary admin leave was set up, it's more closely aligned or similar to the FEMLA sick leave. But again, the FEMLA sick leave allows, it has much more, there broader categories to qualify for.
Yeah.
Because also recognizing that with the school
Mhm.
closure leave, that portion of it, it's also subject to a 10-day period before it kicks in.
Right. Right.
That's where, but the paid sick leave, the 80 hours can cover for school closures as an example. So you may have an employee who uses, schools are closed, I make a request, or I need this for childcare. I have the first 10 days or 80 hours is covered by sick leave, and then the remaining time until I hit the cap would be covered under the school closure leave
Yeah, I understand.
for the rest of the 12 weeks. Sorry, there's a lot of different scenarios to it,
Yeah.
and it's there's a lot of layers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it is something, like was, like you mentioned, that it is something that small businesses that are utilizing, or, where they have employees, if it's under 500 employees, they're getting a tax break on this.
Right.
We're mandated to provide it.
Yeah.
But it's something that the county's paying for.
So my last question with that then, the 80 hours that are in the expanded federal family leave policy is what you were talking about for that 10-day waiting period? Is
Yes.
that okay?
Because-
And not the county's temporary admin leave?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
The sick leave, the expanded FMLA sick leave.
Yeah.
Does have school closure language as being an eligible
Okay.
criteria for accessing that leave.
Okay.
To cover that 10-day waiting period, and then the school closure leave
Right.
would then cover the rest.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for your patience. I just wanted to make sure that I had at least a 50% understanding.
Yeah.
Commissioner Olson, do you
I don't
have any thoughts?
questions. I think the questions that Commissioner Sterton and you asked covered all my
Okay.
questions. My only question or my comment would be is that if we wrap the same language around this that we just wrapped around the emergency declaration,
Mhm.
where we can terminate it at any time, or what we did, would that suffice? So when that takes effect, we can look at it and say, yes, okay, ours is gone.
Mhm.
And actually act on it then, instead of putting some kind of a firm date.
I see what you mean.
Because we don't know when that federal legislation, hopefully it'll be approved, but by the time they get it implemented, who knows when that will be.
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
No, I was just going to say, my understanding is that's April 2nd. Is that correct?
April 1st.
April
April
1st.
1st. Yeah.
Are you
That's what
talking
they're
about
saying.
the admin leave policy, or are you talking about the new federal?
No, I'm
leave?
talking about our admin leave policy, that if we would renew it or extend it
Mhm.
with the same language we extended the emergency with, that where we can say on the advice of legal counsel and can say, okay, now we feel this covers it, so now we're gonna drop ours.
So the way it currently reads is it says the policy will automatically expire on the termination of the state of emergency declared by the governor, or 30 days from the date of adoption, whichever occurs first, unless extended by the board. That's what it currently says. It also says that this policy may be modified and or extended by the administrator as needed in increments of 30 days or less, subject to ratification by the board. So you gave Ken the authority to make some changes to this. And this is not tied to our state of emergency declaration. It's the governor's.
I think that the biggest question was to come to get the boards, what they want to do policy. Do they, do you want to continue to have this policy run, or do you want it to sunset with the new federal legislation that's coming down? My recommendation I know we're going to have employees that are going to have challenges that may have exhausted their FMLA.
Yeah, that's what I'm
or
hearing.
And, and it's both a benefit, I want to make sure that folks that may have that diagnosis or being tested, that they're not making an economic decision to come to work.
Yeah.
So my recommendation would be is to allow the policy to continue. But again, that's just my recommendation, and I just wanted to float that out.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry, you had a
Yeah, that's what I was getting at,
Okay.
and I'm fine for leaving it float, continue.
Okay, for sure.
One question. So can, allowing this to continue concurrent with the new policy, federal policy on April 1st, how does that impact the county in terms of, because it's a mandate on one hand, so how does that impact us in terms of what we are now going to be paying for?
It's really hard to gauge the impact because I'm not 100% clear how many folks, honestly, I think quite a few folks are going to exercise, because with the school closure, that has a wide ranging effect. There's a lot of folks that are trying to make arrangements for childcare and with the schools being closed. And I think right now, I believe the school closure is until April 28th, till the end of April. And so, looking at that, there's kind of twofold. One, there's a budgetary impact that, to be honest, I won't clearly know what that budgetary impact even looks like until we get a little bit further down the road, because right now we're 2 weeks, 3 weeks into this, and it's really hard to pull the data. The operational impact, there's that as well. If we have a lot of folks that are out on protected leave, and then we're going to have to take a close look at coverage issues, especially in HHS, and especially related to the positions that are on the front lines in providing, really providing services directly related to COVID. And then also with the mental health crisis and law enforcement and everything else. I mean, so seeing that, it's really hard to measure or even predict what that's going to look like, because we'll know, I think, pretty early on when we start seeing the application process, once we get the policy in place and we see the applications coming in.
Yeah.
But again, I think we're in challenging times right now, and I'm trying to balance both keeping our services going, also looking at it from a budget perspective, on what that impact's going to be, but then also recognizing that we have a lot of hardworking employees that are significantly challenged at this point, feeling this impact on how are they going to manage with the child care versus, in the financial impact. So,
Yeah.
and I know we're in a really difficult time right now. And that's why when I look at the impact, I will know, and I can report back as we proceed in the coming weeks, specifically, because I will be we're going to be having more discussions about needs and resources and things that are going to come up, because it seems to be changing hourly. It was daily before, but it just kind of seems like the demands are constantly changing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, are you okay?
No,
That's-
thanks.
Thank you, Ken, for kind of laying that out there. I think that I really appreciate that your acknowledgement that the federal policy may, even if it doesn't actually end up leaving out people, that it may, and that could create a lot of grief and concern for employees who are doing the work of the county right now. So I feel like in light of some of the public comments that we received too, it would be wise to extend the policy to be able to make it clear to our employees that their safety is really important, and that we need them to be healthy, just kind of going forward to do the work of the county, both now but also into the future. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm for my only question is it's the way that it's on the agenda is we would be continued until April 2nd, which is only 1 week from now, and that doesn't seem like it would be good to extend. I would rather move to maybe April 30th then.
Did you it looked,
Well, we
I wanted to
on the
make sure that-
agenda, the one thing you could do is, because we do have language already in the existing policy, that it runs with the governor's declared emergency. So if you took no action on this, or you could go with taking no action on
Yeah.
this agenda item.
Okay.
And we
And then it would just
basically continue with the admin leave policy being in place based on the language, correct?
Well,
Until
no,
the
it's
30 days.
right. It's the termination of the state of emergency declared by the governor, or 30 days from the date of adoption, whichever occurs first. unless
Yeah.
extended. So at the moment, it would run through April 16th. But if the board chose now to extend it,
You could do that by motion. Thank you.
right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm fine with it if it runs through April 16th. That
Revisit it at some point between now and the 16th if you wanted to extend it beyond that date.
I'm with 16th. And hopefully we'll know much more about the federal legislation by that
That's
time.
probably, yeah. Okay. Well,
Okay, so we'll just tickle that to make sure we bring that back for consideration
Yeah.
if you'd like to extend it. at a
I just
later
want to
date.
check how many meetings away that is for just a, so we got 1, 2. It would expire at the 3rd meeting from now.
And the
I guess that's 3 meetings from now is a long time in the world of coronavirus. Okay. Well, I suppose then it sounds like there's consensus of the board that we will table this and let the admin leave policy remain as is for now.
Do we need a motion for that?
No, because it's
You're
good
not
until
taking
April
any
16th.
I think because we're not
so
taking action.
Okay.
But I just wanted to make sure that that was clear for the record
Yeah.
that
it's
we
clear
are
for me.
not taking action on item F4. Okay. Thank you for lots of answering the questions that you just are learning about quickly.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yes, please.
I'd like to go back to item F3. I hadn't anticipated that the board might be willing to extend the emergency declaration indefinitely. And I wanted just to double check the statute. And the way the statute reads is the ordinance or the board order or resolution must limit the duration of the state of emergency to the period of time during which the conditions giving rise to the declaration exist or are likely to remain in existence. So that's the language that I would need to put in if you wanted to keep it open-ended. What most other counties appear to have done is to have picked a date well enough out into the future that you aren't having to revisit this with any frequency, but putting a end date on it, which is what I think I would recommend that we do in order to be as clearly as we can in compliance with the statute. What many folks have done is put it out to June 30th, the end of the fiscal year. If you were comfortable with that, I would suggest maybe we extend it out to June 30th. And then we wouldn't be in a position to revisit it unless the board wanted to end it sooner than that, prior to June 30th.
So by putting June 30th as the end date there, that does not preclude us from rescinding it prior to that?
Correct, or extending it beyond.
Or
Either would
extending
still
it.
be an option.
Okay,
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
It says the declaration is hereby extended and shall remain in effect unless further extended or earlier terminated.
Right,
okay.
Yeah, so it's already there.
so I apologize for that.
And do we, since we voted on that, do we need to amend that motion?
So I was going to ask Carolina, do we know yet what that board order would have been numbered?
No,
I think it would have been 105, but I'm not certain.
One oh five.
105.
Okay.
So what I would suggest is a motion to rescind previously adopted board order 20-105 and then replace that with new board order 20105 extending the emergency declaration through June 30th of 2020.
Like he said.
I would move approval of rescinding Board Order 2-105 and replacing it with new Board Order 2-105
20105.
With the
with the June
and
30th,
currently, yeah,
Correct.
June 30th date.
okay,
Thank you.
great. Thank you,
Thanks,
Council.
Carolina.
Thank you, Commissioner. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Let the record show unanimous approval for item F3. Thank you. Item F5 is consideration of adopting a resolution recognizing April as Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month. And commissioners?
Mr. Chair, I would like to say that especially with what we're facing right now, we know that in times of economic challenges, especially people who also have issues with substance abuse, and that's a lot of our kids that are being abused. We're a lot of the services available to the people with substance abuse issues are going to be challenging to deliver. And also, we know that the economic concerns are going to make it hard for kids. So I think, especially now when the governor has said that some of the improvements to the child welfare system are not likely going to take place, which is a disappointment, I think that would be money well spent. So I think this is definitely, I would move approval of adopting the resolution recognizing April as Child Abuse and Prevention Month.
Thank you. And to add on to that, I hope that in a future special session, we can get the money for the child abuse intervention centers. Is that the network? I'm blanking. Like Juliet's house. So
Juliet's house. And
yes,
that
I
is-
forget what the bill number was
I
in
don't
the
have the
short
bill
session,
number, but yes.
I'm hoping that will be. I'm guessing that Representative Noble is keeping that in mind. Yeah. Okay. Well, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, sorry. Your pause is.
Resolution into record.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Commissioner Sterrett, would you like to? Or do you want me to do it?
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's been our standard practice. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Carolina. Good catch.
Thank you for remembering. And you did have a motion, that's correct?
I did.
Okay. In the Board of Commissioners for the State of Oregon, for the County of Yamhill, sitting for the transaction of county business, in the matter of a resolution recognizing April 2020 as Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month, which is Resolution 20-03-26-1. Whereas child abuse is considered to be one of our nation's most serious public health problems, with scientific studies documenting the link between abuse and neglect and a wide range of medical, emotional, psychological, and behavioral disorders in children. And whereas it is estimated that 1 in 4 children will suffer significant abuse before the age of 18, and annually over 84,000 Oregonian children are reported to the Department of Human Services as having been abused and neglected, with over 12,000 child abuse victims confirmed in 2018. And whereas the physical, emotional, and financial impact of abuse and neglect falls most heavily on children of all ages and abilities who come from economic, racial, and social backgrounds. And these crimes affect many more family members, friends, neighbors, and coworkers. And whereas a trauma-informed response to victims promotes healing and fosters strength in survivors. And whereas child victims who feel understood and supported are most likely to disclose their victimization, seek services to find healing, and participate in the justice process. And whereas providing victims and their families with knowledge of their rights and available services further strengthens their ability to recover by restoring a sense of self-empowerment. And whereas Yamhill County is dedicated to strengthening child abuse survivors and their non-offending families in the aftermath of crime, building resilience in our communities and our victim responders, and working for justice for all victims and survivors to prevent neglect and abuse. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved that the board, on behalf of the citizens of Yamhill County, hereby recognizes the month of April as Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month. Done this 26th day of March 2020, Yamhill County Board of Commissioners. Thank you.
Yeah.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Chair, sorry.
It's okay.
I was reading this. It's numbered Resolution 20-03-26-1.
Yes.
That's actually already, it should be 20-03-26-2, because we've had resolution number 1 previously when we extended the emergency declaration.
Oh, okay.
So just clarify that this would be Resolution 20-03-26-2.
Okay, let the record show that the resolution recognizing April 2020 as Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month is Resolution 20-03-26-2.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to get this. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Let the record show unanimous approval of item F5. Moving on to item F6 is consideration of approval to authorize Lindsay Manfrin and other designated individuals to place CMHP director holds on persons deemed dangerous to self or others, or mentally ill persons placed on conditional release, outpatient commitment, or trial release, rescinding Board Order 19-469. And Commissioner Sherry, do you want to add anything more?
Typically, what we do once a year is we update this with with more appropriate employees, and they've added some and removed others who are no longer on the team.
Right.
So this is just pretty much what we do every year.
I thought that in light of the current situation, it'd be good to just have you explain
Okay.
that
And
this is just what we do every year.
every single year, and this is nothing unusual.
Yeah.
I will
yes.
say that this is a little bit different because we may be coming back more frequently because, again, with absences or folks being out, that we may need to more, we may be coming back. And actually this need
Updating
and
it.
the reason we really wanted to get this before you this week is we want to make sure we have coverage with the more and more absences, or, you know, if we start seeing that we make sure we have sufficient coverage that can act on.
People on admin leave of some kind.
Sure.
Yeah, on leave. Yeah.
So I would move approval
Okay.
of item F6, and that is consideration of the approval to authorize designated individuals for director holds according to, and then rescinding Board Order 19-469.
Okay. Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Let the record show unanimous approval of item F6. Section G is public hearings, and we have none. Section H is announcements. And
You were going to bring forward and out.
do I do it as H or as F?
It would be under F if a commissioner has an add-on.
Perfect.
It's add-ons and non-consent items.
Okay, great. We will come back to item F7, which is, I should probably get the name of it, but you have seen the proposal from our SEDCOR contractor to do a immediate business grant program adoption, and I should pull it up. Carolina, do you have it in the packet? Oh, thank you. So this is a proposal for an immediate relief grant and economic stimulus loan program. A number of counties and cities have retooled their video lottery dollars through a program to attempt to provide immediate financial help to small businesses in their communities, especially in light of how slow it can be for other sources of funding to come through. And in some cases, I'm learning that people are not interested in like the SBA loans, the Small Business Administration loans, for many, many reasons, you know. So Abhisha put together a program very quickly modeled on some of the other cities and counties who've done similar things. Have you been able to read it? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts? Abhisha is happy to call in if you have questions for her.
No, I think at this time, it's appropriate to support our small business owners. My really concern was the part where she's recommending we should fund, I think it was $200,000.
250.
250,000 out of the general fund. And tell you right now, I don't know where that 250,000 would do the most good, you know.
Mhm.
So I'm not for taking money, given the COVID virus and where we stand and the other program we do. I'm not really for, even though I think it's a great idea. I don't know if we're in a financial situation to take $250,000 from the general fund and put it into economic. As far as retooling our video lottery money, I don't have any problem. I'd rather give that up for a year to get this program going than I would to take money out of our general fund.
So I agree with Commissioner Olson, but I
Yeah.
do have a question about the video lottery funds. So the money that we have used up to now, the video lottery money we've expended, what is left of that, and what is the forecast for
Yeah.
what, or just ballpark, what we'll wind up with next time? I know we don't have hard and fast numbers, but do we have a reasonable assumption of what we'll be receiving next time? Also, given the fact that with a lot of with video lottery basically being shut down, portions of that are not going to be coming to us. So that's a significant revenue stream that will no longer exist. So I wanted to know what we have left of video lottery money that we haven't expended, because I know that we
Yeah,
have with our
exactly.
the grant program.
You know, I ran a quick report on Fund 26 this morning just to look at that, just strictly with the video lottery that's earmarked or goes directly into Fund 26 for economic development. We budgeted like 300,000 for the year. To date, we've had 325,000 come in. Now that additional 25,000 that came in is not necessarily that we have appropriation authority for it, and because that's above and beyond what we had budgeted for the year. And those economic development funds, that's the primary revenue source that comes into Fund 26. And we've already, we've awarded 250,000 as part of the grants program for this year. And then we also have the other contracts and some of the other funds that we have in there utilizing beginning balance and some of the pool and bond interest that we have on, they come into this fund. You know, that has been spent on our SEDCOR contract, and it's also been spent a portion on our bypass lobbyists. There's a portion here. And then there's also 90,000 that was transferred to fairgrounds and parks that's being. Long answer, you know, this wasn't necessarily something that was built into the budget. We built the budget based on the revenue projections, and you know, you know, so a lot of those funds were already spent for this year. I haven't looked at other funds, or if this discussion is really on the video lottery. You know, basically what we were anticipating to receive for video lottery this year, we've spent. So, you know, for anything, because we can't spend more than we appropriate.
Right.
And we didn't have any funds budgeted for this, you know, I mean, it's an emergency, so we didn't.
Yeah.
You know, nobody really foresaw this a year ago when we were building budget. So it is something I don't think we have the economic development funds right now to support this. I haven't looked at, you know, I'll just point out, you do have some other funds that are discretionary that you've used in the past for grants and things like that. One is the landfill license reserve, but there's limitations on that because we had a lot of discussion that there's with the unknown status of the landfill and what's happening, you know, there's not the same level of funds being transferred into that. So once we spend it down, it's spent. There's no outside revenues that are going to come in and replenish that fund except for some interfund loans. The tricky part with that, because we didn't award any grants during this budget year, out of that, it was all placed in a restricted reserve, so it's in an an unappropriated ending balance. So the only way we could actually access those funds would be through a supplemental budget to get to those. The other fund that you have that you've used historically for grants or larger projects is the O&C fund. And I don't think we've awarded very many grants out of that. Just a reminder on that one, that's one that's been pretty conservative with how we've used those funds, because that's another one that in the past was having revenues coming in from O&C that would fund projects there, but right now there's no revenues coming into the O&C funds. So again, that would be one-time money that if we put it into the program, and we have about $500,000 in that fund. You know, those are the main ones that I can think of off the top of my head outside of general fund.
Well, I know they're working on the SRS and the
I was going to ask you about
PILT and everything, and it looks like that was reauthorized. I don't know when ONC says that we'll probably be getting more funds than we did.
Mhm.
And of course, like Ken said, now we're not getting anything. If that was the case and we can legally get into those ONC funds, taking a certain amount of money out of those ONC funds and transferring to this, I'm
Yeah.
not opposed to.
Right. And I was, I wrote it down, but I would have to look back to give you the projected date that Jay Sullivan, I got this right?
Right.
Yes. Said that he thought that the funds would be transferred or released. And it was, I want to say it was the end of March is what his projection was. But you had a question or a comment as well.
No, go ahead and finish that.
Okay, I was just thinking that with that comment, I mean, I don't know how many things Congress is moving around. I mean, obviously they're doing a lot of work right now, but I think this is more of an administrative thing to release those funds.
It is because they can't move those. They can't move
Yeah.
those from the original ONC Act.
Yeah.
They can't.
Right.
They can't move those funds.
That's a good point. And so I would also, I think that would be a good source of them. And I'm hesitant to take from our reserves, but when Ken and I have talked about different sources of funding for different things, it's always a reminder that because accounts like this are intermittent, we don't know when we're going to get the money, and then we get some. That it's not something that can go to daily operations, right? To fund the assessor's office or sheriff on a reliable basis, but for something like this that's an emergency where we're trying to the proposal essentially is trying to identify businesses around the county that need emergency dispersals to hold on to being present so that when our economy and our business structure come back, they can start up again. And so to me, that makes sense as a source. Thanks for letting me finish.
I was just going to reiterate what Commissioner Olson said about the general fund.
Yeah.
I don't think we're in a position, and I think we're going to be finding out just how precarious our budget is come budget time. We are going to have not only the concerns we have going into it, but now we have questions about how the impact of the COVID virus on the county operations. I know at the state level, the governor has talked about questions about being able to deliver basic services. One of the concerns I have is county basically service insolvency. At what point are we going to have to curtail some of our basic services because of budget constraints and because of this emergency?
Mm-hmm.
So I am concerned about any kind of an expenditure at this point as far as when we don't know where we're at. So it seems like even if we went to ONC, even if we went to, and the landfill license reserve, from what I understand, it was the tipping fees were about $1 million. Was it $1 million a year that was actually coming in, or is that, I know that $1 million figure, but I can't remember. So whatever it is in terms of that revenue, that's not there. The ONC money, while we know it's coming, I wasn't sure if we always have to worry about Pilton SRS, if that's going to wind up coming, how much and all that. I'm a little concerned about expending anything at this point, only because we don't have hard and fast budget numbers.
Yeah.
So I also think with the video lottery dollars, we don't even have those to play with. So the other thing is I've seen in the past with some of these grants and loans, I don't feel that all our businesses in the county are even aware of it. And we have sometimes given loans and grants to different companies twice, whereas a majority of the companies in our county don't even know these exist. So I'm concerned about making sure that this is a pot of money that's available, that everybody knows about.
Yeah.
And if everybody doesn't know about it, then it just seems unfair that we can pick and choose. I would love to be able to be finding the companies that really need propping up right now. I know the federal stimulus is really going to help employees, even those independent contractors who've typically not been covered, the extension of the unemployment benefits. I know we're going to have some of that, and it's going to be coming quickly. I think we should hold off until we know what numbers are at the county level, and then come up with a plan that's more equitable for businesses that are on the brink.
So, Commissioner, can I address some? Oh,
I was just going to say that that's one thing that I know Abishon Sidcar been real good with is whatever money they will do all the publication. They'll make sure all of our local businesses. So that's something that the county doesn't have to do. And this program may actually run through SEDCOR, and SEDCOR will ensure that they gets to where the money needs. So.
Right. And a follow up on that comment is that I know that now more than ever, our local chambers are working very, very closely with Abisha and with Eric Anderson, who is also at SEDCOR, and with Jody Christensen through Regional Solutions. So that they, I think they call it the core, but I can't remember what core stands for. Can you remember?
I won't even
Okay.
try it.
No,
but
I know.
Yeah, I know, but it is core.
I can see the words,
Yeah,
but
it's cool.
so I know that now more than ever they're working really hard together, and they're including people like downtown associations, MEDP is another one, and looking at the criteria, the eligibility that's proposed, right? It's a proposal. A business who's been the recipient of a grant in the last 12 months is excluded, and I think that's a really good thing. When I was reading through it, I was really happy to see that, because it really is part of an attempt to cast the net as wide as possible with smaller amounts of money. So for some people and their businesses, they are probably not going to bother, just like some businesses aren't going to recognize that it's not useful for them to apply for an SBA, emergency, whatever, impacted disaster loan. The landfill license reserve has a minimum of $240,000 per year that comes into it, because that's the way that the contract was set up. So it does have money coming in. I just want to put that on there for the record. That's the minimum that's in the contract, regardless of how much garbage goes to the landfill. I think that was everything I wanted to bring up. Yeah.
So
But,
that's a,
Just to clarify.
Oh yeah, please.
It's not necessarily, there's a minimum amount, but that doesn't mean it's dedicated to landfill license reserve.
Oh, that's right.
It's the
Thank you.
solid waste fund, and then we do a transfer from solid waste fund that goes into landfill license reserve.
That's right.
A majority of the funds are actually held in the solid waste for post-closure and solid waste activities.
Perfect.
And then there's an annual transfer that happens into landfill license reserve that's available more as a discretionary grant
Right.
program.
Thank you for clarifying. I could see in the solid waste fund. Okay. Yeah. So it's the whole thing.
And another, there was a couple things I also wanted to just kind of clarify too. What's being proposed here was not a grant program, it was a loan program. So I also just wanted to throw that out, that anything that would come along with this would be subject to a repayment agreement. So it's not that the funds, it could be paid back if you work out all the mechanics associated with what the loan program would actually look like. And that can be rather complicated. And the other part that I didn't mention in Fund 26 is the revolving loan program that we already have that's existing. But recognizing that was tied to a community development block grant from 1985. Those funds have been there for quite some time. I think that's the one that we have the agreement with COG, that they administer the program and they basically act as the agent for processing any applications and get those, right? We haven't seen businesses use that, and there's limitations. I think most do here, and the interest rates or some of the conditions associated with it is why we don't see a lot of businesses necessarily applying for that.
Right.
But I just wanted to clarify, because that's a $200,000 line item that's in Fund 26, Economic Development Funds. But again, we just don't see a lot of actions or activity around that. And there's a lot of strings tied to that fund that I don't believe at this point we could use it for something like this. I mean, it may be a resource there, but I believe the minimum interest rate for that is like 4%.
5.5 is what it says here.
Right.
it's very,
Yeah. So I mean, that one's, I understand. You
Mhm.
probably go down to the bank and get a much better interest rate.
2.5. That's what I hear.
Right.
But along those lines, I also want to clarify, as far as I understand the proposal from Abisha and Segcor, there's like a loan program, but there's also an immediate grant program.
Okay.
And one of the proposal is the grant, immediate relief grant program proposal is for $2,500 grants. So these are small to distribute as much as possible around the county by population. And then the small business emergency loan program proposal is that essentially it's the medium term, right? So it's not the immediate, but more of the medium for the next 4 to 6 months. The idea of that she has proposed through Segcor is to work with the governor's office and regional solutions to leverage those funds to have a pool of money for rebuilding businesses, buying up inventory to get yourself going when markets return and business activity returns. So
A lot of the rural, even some of the grants through the rural, USDA rural, they are grants, they require some kind of a match.
Mhm.
And that's part of this, is allowing those small businesses to be able to provide that match so they qualify for it.
Okay.
So,
Okay, that's a good clarification.
So my concern is I just want to make sure there
Yeah.
are some businesses, there are a lot of businesses that are not involved with the chambers. There are a lot of
Mhm.
businesses that are kind of out on their own or for whatever reason have decided not to become members of the chamber. And they're not in this loop. It's sort of like this club that if you know about all this stuff, you can access it. And I'm concerned
Mhm.
about those businesses because those are the ones I think really do have a need. I want to make sure that anything we do gets that information out, and I don't know how you do that.
Yeah.
So
I'm with you
I
on
am
that.
concerned about that, and I just want to make sure that we're not over our skis when it comes to committing funds when we don't have a real good assessment of where we're at going into this budget cycle, because this is going to be really challenging. This is no fooling around. This is going to be something we've not seen, and I believe probably not since the recession, when the county actually had to talk about layoffs and things like that. So I think we have to be really careful, but I do want to make sure we can do anything to prop up our businesses.
Yeah. And I really, I hear you about a lot of those, but.
And I think, as we talk about the COVID-19 virus, that this is just another way to make sure our economy stays strong.
Mhm.
And I don't feel bad at all about taking money out of the ONC funds, because we do have money in the ONC funds. I don't think I'd go $250,000. I might go 150, 125, but something to get out there and then judge that and make sure it works. I have no doubt at all that that Sedcor and Abisha, they'll get the word out to all the businesses in Yamhill County. I mean, they do that with regional solutions, in team with regional solutions, the governor's office, and so I think that would get out. I would not depend on the chambers to do it myself, because you're right, they're only going to hit at chamber members.
Right.
And we're not aiming to be a supporter of necessarily of the chamber business. We're being a supporter of all businesses.
Correct.
So,
And do
Right.
we have is there perhaps maybe through business licenses where they can be contacted? And that seems like sort of a large lift there to ask to go through that whole list of people, but
Mhm.
people who have business licenses.
And I'll just
Oh, yeah.
say that if there's questions and if you, Abisha is watching the live stream and is on standby and ready,
Okay.
for a call. So if there's specific questions and if you'd like me to call and we can have her on the phone, she can answer questions like that.
I'm happy. It sounds like we're starting to get into the questions time. So yeah,
Is that something you'd like to do?
Yes.
I think
And
so.
only because, business licenses per the county,
Yeah.
we only have, it's a different animal than business licenses that you would have in a city. So
the
it's
city of
not,
Bentonville doesn't have business licenses.
and some don't have any at all. So how do you get those people? And will little tiny amounts of money spread so thinly actually generate anything? Is it just too little, too late? I don't know the answer to
Yeah.
that.
Well, I think I look more at those people who get the word out as our partners, and I look at like public agencies like Regional Solutions, even MEDP, who will put the word out because they don't just put out, they do. So
Right.
that's what we have to depend on, is having set quarter and get the word out so everybody does know that it's all the businesses do know it's available.
And this, from what I understand, this is also can be considered an opportunity to encourage municipalities.
Hey,
as
Abhishek, you're
well.
live.
That makes sense. Welcome, Abhisha.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi, Abisha.
Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners Christian, Ken, and Carolina. I can see you all on screen. It's great to see you and to see you doing well.
Well, I hope we at least don't look too bad.
It's a long,
You look
it's
great.
A long angle. So.
Good.
Abhisha, there are some
so-
questions for you.
Wonderful. Do you want to start with your questions, or do you want me to offer an overview to begin with?
Abisha, why don't you offer an overview? I mean, because if you've been watching the stream, you've seen some of the questions that we've asked Ken and everything. So why don't you start with a little bit of an overview?
You bet. Thank you. So what I put in front of you is a two-tiered approach. And I think as Casey had clarified, we are asking for consideration on two separate programs looking to have two different levels of impact. So the first of those programs is an immediate relief grant program, where basically I'm asking for a redirection of the county video lottery funds dollars, which of course, as Ken has clarified where we're at financially with those funds. And I'm not exactly sure when it gets refunded for 2020-21. But if we have that pot of funds still available, it's essentially asking for a redirection to a new program. These funds, as I have shared in the attachment in regards to the proposal, would be dispersed countywide based on a population percentage allocation. And the intent of this is to ensure that we have some sort of equitable distribution throughout the county. I've also done some rounding and some determining of no less than. So you'll see where for some of our smaller communities, we've structured it with a no less than 2 grants per community sort of an approach. And this is from 2010 census data, and it is the most clear data that we have, and it's what's currently posted on our website. I did take the approach with this to try to ensure that as we were having folks submit applications for this, that we had some really clear parameters. So we are looking for these funds, which are only offered at $2,500 grants, to support businesses that have been immediately impacted by change in service or closure order. We're looking for small businesses of employees of 15 or less. And as we were structuring this, we also, as Ken and others have mentioned, we didn't know what packages are coming from the state or federal government, and things are changing on an hourly basis. We wanted to ensure that business owners who at the time did not qualify for unemployment would also be able to access these funds. We are also hearing that folks are not just potentially just interested in the SBA loan programs, but there are a lot of limiting factors that will prevent folks from qualifying for those programs. So we have businesses that fall into this gap area. And what we're hoping to do with these funds is to meet that gap area for a short period of time, 4 to 6 weeks. This is why we're asking them to verify that they've experienced economic loss due to COVID-19. We're also asking them to self-identify and confirm that they have sought other options for relief, such as rent and mortgage forgiveness, working with vendors to improve payment terms, partnering with utility services. We would expect that they are talking to their existing lenders to talk about additional loan programs or extension of their payment terms. We're asking that a company has been in business for more than 12 months. I'm certainly willing to hear suggestions to modifications on any of these line items. As Commissioner Kula mentioned, this is still in the proposal phase, of course. And then we did make the comment that businesses who'd recently received county economic development grant monies in the last 12 months would not qualify, nor would national chains, as we understand that some of those national chains are offering some programs for their folks already. So I won't go through the details of how we discussed administering the loan, or the grant rather, but I will share that we feel, I've worked with Carrie Martin on this from your team, and we feel that we can manage this administratively and we could execute something fairly quickly. So that is the proposed grant program. Again, it's a reallocation of funds that were already allocated for grants for businesses. Do you have any questions on that before I go to the loan program proposal?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Abisha, can you just clarify, these are existing funds that were earmarked for grant program? Is that what you said?
Oh, yes, thank you, Commissioner Sterrett. So I make that as a pretty broad statement, meaning that our grant program at the county level is already established, and that this was essentially the proposal for the 2020 grant program that we would expect to open in May for applications and close in June for applications, with disbursements in August. So this would be the small grant program and the strategic investment fund specifically, which we issued last year. So how that marries up with funding timelines and from the video lottery bucket and budgeting is certainly a question for Ken, but that is my mindset as I was putting together this proposal, is that those funds were already being considered for disbursement through our existing grant program.
Okay, Ken, can you clarify? Because my understanding is that we are out of video lottery money.
So what happens, because the timeline and the grant timeline that is set up, no funds can be awarded until we get into the new budget year. So we run on a July 1 fiscal year. So, whatever grant funds, we could advertise and we could do the grant program now, but we wouldn't be able to release any funds until we get into the new budget year. And it would depend on what the final adopted budget is, what the final adopted budget looks like for that program would dictate how much funds are available for that grant program. So just to kind of clarify timeline that, with Oregon budget law and local budget law and how we get things set, we have the revenues that are, we anticipate the revenues, we build a budget, we adopt a budget, and we identify those expenditures or those appropriations for the next year. So the timeline that Abisha is describing for the grant program is correct. We can do a solicitation, we can do an advertisement, as long, just being clear that it depends on funds being available to support the program. We can go through that process, but we can't award or actually issue money until we get into the new budget year, because we haven't adopted a budget that sets the appropriation for those funds.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, which is why I think that, Ken brought up the other funds and why Commissioner Olson was suggesting the ONC. To clarify your comments, Abisha, is that because that Fund 26 doesn't have that money, we were talking about other funds for that source.
We
Would
can't
that-
spend those funds
Right.
this year.
Yeah.
Would we be able to make a fund transfer the money from when we do receive those funds back to ONC? If we considered it, we just transfer those funds?
That is a good question.
It depends, because I think we're talking about, and that is something that we could do as if we use the funds this year
Mhm.
and then going into next year, I would build in an interfund transfer where we could transfer those funds to replenish that. I'd have to look at it, because that would be an interfund loan.
Mhm.
So I would need to do some more research on the mechanics of that. But I will say it is a possibility, but I would need to confirm that we could do that.
Well, good question.
And with the restrictions on video lottery funds, would it be acceptable to do that? Could we do that? So I would think that if we could do that, knowing that the pot of money was going to be taken from video lottery dollars, and that it would be paid back to any other fund we would take it from, kind of rob Peter, pay Paul type of thing. I think that has more of a comfort level.
Right. Like we could do this now, and then we could replenish it once the fiscal year.
With money
Change.
that was earmarked for
Earmarked
economic development.
Exactly for that, yeah.
From budget law, Ken, does that seem doable?
I believe so. If we can clearly track what the funds are repaying and it was used
Yeah.
for an economic development grant, it could be, it's just the mechanics, and I could do more research into actually, if this is something that the board wants to explore, I could do some more research into the actual mechanics of that. Because essentially it would be an interfund loan, but it's important to note when we usually do interfund loans from one department to another, there's a repayment plan and the interest charged for the funds for that interfund loan. So that's why at this point, I think I'd have to dig into it a little bit more and do some more research on what the mechanics would look like for that.
Right, the question about whether you can use video lottery dollars for interest payments was the next thing that on its face value makes me wonder. But okay, well, thank you for.
I mean, it's for economic development.
Yes.
So if we're reimbursing a program that's doing an economic development, if it falls within that definition.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those that with everything else that's happening, and to be honest, I haven't done a ton of research or really climbed into the budget or the mechanics on how something like this could work. I haven't had time to really dive into that.
But it's possible.
It
I mean,
is.
it seems like it's something that would be possible.
Yeah.
And then the only other question for Abhishek was about making sure that even the smallest, the businesses who aren't interconnected with chambers and they're sort of out there on their own, just trying to run their businesses, that we could find a way to get to them. Is there a way that comes to your mind where we could connect with some of these really small, sometimes 1 and 2 person businesses and get them this information as well?
You bet. Thank you, Commissioner Sterrett. That's on my list. Certainly, I heard you mention that a few times, and I think it's a very important question to be asking. I also appreciate, Commissioner Olson, your confidence in SEDCOR and our communication. This is something I've been thinking about for quite some time, and as I included in the proposal, SEDCOR has been designated as the central communication entity for the regional solutions, which now they're a reaction, a COVID recovery team. So we are the central communication point for the core team. And as such, we have been in contact not just with the chambers, the 2 larger chambers in the county being Chehalem Valley Chamber and the McMinnville Chamber. We've also been in contact with downtown associations and some emerging chambers, such as they have in Sheridan. So as I was thinking about how we would market this and make sure that we have a very good equitable distribution of communication, we have looked at things like communicating directly with existing and emerging downtown association groups, existing and emerging chambers of commerce. We would be looking to put something in the local papers that are routed, and I also have started talking with city managers who, especially in some of those smaller communities, are the best direct contact for those small businesses. And considering the fact that many of them are not at their storefronts, so having direct contact with them, maybe sometimes we have some older emails that are and phone numbers that might exist on their state filing for their business registry. So getting direct contact with those folks is really important. So I can absolutely put together a marketing proposal for you to consider. I don't have something currently drafted. I've been thinking through this quite a bit. Also intending to use social media as a distribution point, potentially through the counties and the individual municipalities' Facebook or YouTube channels. So I'm still structuring how best to approach that, but it is certainly on our mind, and I would be happy to formalize something to present to you if that would be of value.
Thank you. That would be great. I'd love to know that all the smaller businesses are getting a chance at this too.
Yeah, the widest net possible, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, to the best of our ability, and that is absolutely our intent. And that's why we included language in there about folks that have recently received some sort of a grant through the county. We want to make sure that there really is access given to as many of these businesses as possible.
Thank you, Abisha.
Well, I know, Abishad, I certainly appreciate the document, and I think it does show in the table that shows for the grant fund 250,000 that every small city would get, like Yamhill gets 2, Carlton would get 2, and I think that takes care of spreading that out around the county. So every part of the county is participating, but I think a good marketing plan would definitely be important to ensure that we get the word out there.
Thank you. I'm also considering an approach of working with the individual cities to see if they have additional funding that they're looking to commit to some sort of a relief effort, and working with them to see what SEDCOR can do to support that effort as well. And that is a very vague statement because I don't know if any of these communities have that sort of funding or are looking to take that approach. Well, at least in terms of grant, I have spoken to one of our community partners who's looking at transitioning a current loan program that they have.
And I don't remember the details, but I believe that one of the smaller cities is working on a pretty small scale version for their own community right now. So I don't want to call it out just in case I get the details wrong.
Yeah. So if there's no other questions on the grant portion, I'll move on to the loan portion.
I think that would be great. Commissioners, are you ready to?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, please, Abhishek.
Okay. Thank you. So if you refer back to my cover page, item number 2 that's listed on there, what I am looking for at this point in terms of this loan program is an allocation. I requested $250,000, realizing at the time of this request that I do not know whether there is any funding available or whether you have an emergency relief fund or any of that sort of thing. But basically identifying here that this would be seed fund for a grant program. Certainly being able to leverage a seeded fund is very valuable in attracting additional funders. At the same time, I'm also looking for commitment of the county to allocate staff time to pursue fleshing out what a loan program would look like. So what I presented you in the attachment is a concept of a loan program. I'm not asking you to accept that exact program as it is written. I'm asking you to consider that this is the concept that we are pursuing. And as Commissioner Kula has mentioned, we are looking at what other communities have done. For example, Lane County just partnered with their CDIF to develop a loan program, and it is a low interest loan program. And so first I want to give some credit to Carrie Martin for doing some investigative work with me on putting this together. And I'll dive into what we are thinking in regards to this loan program. So you'll see that it starts with discussing what our existing Yamhill County revolving loan fund looks like. We do have a balance of, from Carrie's account and speaking with the Council of Governments, $300,000, and that might not be an exact number, but that's what we've been given. And it does have a high interest rate, and it has been historically unaccessed due to that high interest rate. We are trying to pursue partnerships and support in seeing if there might be any efforts made with the Department of Commerce and the federal government to see if we can get those funds released from the current stronghold that prevents it from being utilized for the greatest good. So we are working on that for sure. So that is an aside. As you go down to the proposed concept, what we're looking to do here, as Commissioner Kula expressed, is what is that next stage of recovery? What we're finding is that, again, with a lot of those SBA loan programs and some of the federal funds, is that there are restrictions and guidelines on those funds that might prevent access for some of our businesses, which is why it would be valuable for us to seed a fund, find other partners, and move in that direction. We also could be pursuing some of those federal funds to bolster this program and just allow for our program to adhere to those federal guidelines. So again, I'm asking for permission to do discovery on this and to present you an ultimate proposal. So what we have looked at doing at this point, again, is to ensure that these businesses can remain solvent through the crisis and be ready to rebuild. And it is a gap loan fund, but it is, again, something that would come a little bit later down the road. It's not a replacement for lost business income. It is not intended to fund a business to pre-crisis level of operations. It's just a mechanism to continue to keep their employees employed through the recovery and to ensure that they have access to the capital that they need to rebuild. Some of what folks, are thinking about in terms of grant and some of these loan programs is, for example, maybe a restaurant who was otherwise a very solvent business. They've had to lay off their employees. Making their rent payments are difficult. Keeping their vendors intact are difficult. And then they go to open up the restaurant and they don't have enough operating cash to buy all of the food that they need to restock the pantry, if you will, so that they can actually gear back up and get running. So again, eligibility looks at that business experiencing mandatory change in service guidelines. One of the reasons we put that in there is that we also have a lot of business partners, and I think this is something to celebrate, who are very strong in this economy right now, and are maybe considered essential providers. And their biggest struggle is actually learning how to manage the guidelines of social distancing on a production line. So we do definitely have some very clear areas of need. One of them we're looking to fund through to address through a grant program. This next bucket or group of folks we're looking to address through this accessible loan program. We charted out some potential terms and looking at what others have done. This could look very different based on the funding source and what we learn between now and when something might be deployed. And again, I'm going to go back to what Ken mentioned, that things are coming out on an hourly basis, and we're not looking to replicate efforts. We're looking to help shore up our county. We also talked a little bit about program operations. And the last part of this that I want to identify or to clarify for everyone is that we are looking to partner with an existing administrator of loan programs. So for us, that might look like the Council of Governments or one of our CDIF partners. We've had several conversations with the Council of Governments, and they would be prepared to assist us in administering a program such as this. I have also asked them, I know that some steps forward might require us to have policy around a loan program or a policy even to maybe receive loan funding. I did not put a lot about that in here at this point because that is more minutia, but I have spoken to John Safstrom at the Council of Governments, and they have a template that they are happy to provide us to kick things off. I'm certain Christian and his team would be very interested in seeing what that might look like. So again, on the loan program, I am asking for three things. I am asking for a commitment to funding. I am asking for a commitment to staffing, and I am asking for approval of this in concept alone to allow us to continue moving forward, identifying partners and resources.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Abisha. Turn
Thank you,
back over
Abisha.
to Casey.
Yeah. Just wanted to make sure I understood, so I thought I should write it down. Right. I think that I feel comfortable going forward with let's say an immediate relief grant program that uses ONC funds with the expectation that we will transfer from Fund 26, and that this will be our economic development grants for the 2020, 2021, I guess, right? 2020, 2021, provided that the budget committee approves it. Right? That's an important component.
Good point. And also, can we commit staff-wise, knowing that we're really challenged right now? Do we
Right.
have that component?
But I was gonna, I thought I would.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
I was just wanted to do the grant program and then but Ken, did you have?
Well, and just maybe to kind of clarify, I think it'd be important to, if the board wants to explore the concept or policy of something like this, basically you would be giving me directive.
Yeah.
And, anything that has to do with the staffing and resources, I would
That would
do
be-
that determination and assignment. I do want to be except for, the odd is because with Avishon Sedcor, that contract for economic development services is with the Board of Commissioners, not necessarily under the county administrator ordinance.
Right.
I don't have the contract in front of me, so I mean, if it's something that the board would like under the contract, and we could look at that it's something that Avishon pursues. But as far as the county resources, I have a lot of things that I'm trying to keep in mind and under consideration. So I would need to do an evaluation on what staffing resources, depending on what the direction of the board, and I could come back and report on that.
That's a good question. That's a good point. Yeah.
Totally agreeable.
Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah. So it's not, we wouldn't be assigning, providing consent and direction to Abhishek on all of those counts. Some of them would be things that you would be working on then,
Correct.
or giving blessing for redirecting.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. Thank you.
Dollar amount? I know Commissioner Olson, you had mentioned a dollar amount.
Well, the video lottery fund, the actual emergency fund, I don't think in the proposal, I don't think we talked about an amount for that emergency fund. What I was talking about was a loan fund, or the grant fund of $250,000, which is additionally based on what we want to do now, or based on where we can get that money, as long as it's paid back to that fund. I don't have any problem with the 250 now, knowing that it will be paid back and replenished as we get additional revenue from ONC and everything. And I don't have a problem.
But knowing that there are going to be, there's going to be an impact to video lottery receipts because of the fact that nobody's playing video lottery now, or they shouldn't be. So if we go ahead and we commit to a certain amount, and then we really don't even come close to that, how would that work?
Well, and that's why we have to be really careful, because also with the budget adoption process, and you were right with the budget committee and everything else, I want to be very careful that we're not necessarily setting up a program that is committing us into a certain, because we have an initial budget that we're working on, and I have projections on what the revenue is going to look like for next year with some of the other revenues, anticipated revenues. So we haven't built that. My recommendation would be if you want to use a portion of the ONC fund, if that's the fund that you're looking at, where we have funds that maybe you identify an amount and we can start building that program with ONC, but then also have it noted that when we get into budget process and we start looking at Fund 26, and if we want a strategy to replenish ONC or do a payback for this, that's when that discussion would occur.
Yeah.
Not necessarily getting into the logistics right now of next year's budget and circumventing the budget process.
Right.
Okay,
That's a
makes
really
sense.
good
Thank you.
clarification. Yeah. That'll be something that hopefully we'll have like pinned on there. Like, okay, this is the time for this conversation, right? Yeah. Commissioner Olson, your thoughts on amounts, or should we ask Abhishek? The table that for the immediate grants, is it 250?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So Ken, I guess my clarification for you, that 250, if we elected to do that, it is separate. We can take it from ONC, but it would be separate come budget time and discussions, how that's going to pay back and everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll just put it out here. There was, having built the initial very, very preliminary initial budget for Fund 26, there probably wasn't going to be 250 available for grant programs for next year.
Yeah.
It was, probably closer to the 200 range. And that's only because, and it's going to require some more discussions, because if you look, in total, and I want to be careful and not get too much into budget deliberations or discussions, but if we have 300,000 that's coming in from video lottery, and if we're planning that a portion of that is going to be for grants, 200,000, that's 100,000 left, plus the SEDCOR contract, plus the parks and fairgrounds contribution, plus some other expenses that are built into that budget. You know, we've been able to offer more grants this year because we did hold off a couple of years ago on awarding any grants. So we had some beginning balance that allowed us to do things. So I just, you know, again, we keep kind of going back into Fund 26, but I just want to recognize that, you know, I still need to confirm or get into the mechanics of what an interfund loan, and then also look at the rules around economic development funds. You know, so there's no, I still need to dive into the mechanics on whether or not we can repay via an interfund loan to ONC. If we can do that, we could actually set up a payment plan where it wouldn't necessarily require a one-time transfer next year to take all 200,000. We would just be paying back over years.
Yeah.
We would have a loan amortization table set up, and we could do repayments if that works. But again, I still need to get into the mechanics and make sure that what I'm providing we can actually do.
Yeah.
So.
And also making sure that those come off the top right away as far as the SEDCOR contract. And again, the budget committee is going to make decisions on whether or not they want allocations to the fair. So things like that. Then we are left with nothing.
Well, we're left with this, which is an immediate grant program for the emergency. But you're right.
Would it be something that the board would be, so in other words, we get more information from Ken and we come back on Thursday, we have more numbers, and then we're able to make make a motion that actually has some specifics in it?
I think that I think that's a great question. It might be something that we could also direct at Abisha about whether we can provide enough direction to her and to Ken to move forward with looking at the information and getting more numbers and giving Abisha enough direction that she can move forward without committing ourselves. Does that make sense?
So that I guess the information we need is regarding staff time, because that's one of Abisha's asks. And then also as far as Ken was going to bring us just some preliminary numbers so that we can come back and say with some assurance to Abisha, we can commit to this, this, and this, so that this actually is feasible.
And
You know, the one thing that I would put out there is again, as a recommendation, I can come back, but I'd really like to, you know, I recognize that there's an immediate need for doing this, and I'd almost like to separate the two. You know, it is two separate proposals. You have the grant program, the emergency relief grant program, and then you have the loan program. I would kind of like to separate the two, and I could come back next week and talk about the grant program, but maybe we delay, you know, give me some time on developing a loan program and how we're going to do that. That's just my recommendation.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, because the grant program now, that's what we want.
That's
roll
what we want,
something out quickly. If we can roll something out, we want to roll that out quickly. So I'm all for dividing it into the emergency grant program, and then we can come back and talk about the loan program.
yes.
But wouldn't COG be doing the bulk of the work on the loan administration and the whole concept and the whole game plan for the loan program? So that wouldn't require us to do a lot of work on it. Abisha, what do you think?
So one of the great things about partnering with existing agencies to administer this sort of program is that a real easy answer is yes. They have the structure in place. They would be the ones managing administration of the loan. The question comes down to at what point and or whether we need to have a policy drafted. So currently the county's revolving fund sits with the Council of Government. So there is already, I would assume, and I'm looking at Christian, though he can't see me, but I'm assuming there's some sort of a contracted relationship between the county and the Council of Governments that allows them to administer that loan for us. So my easy assumptions are that we already have some sort of a program in place. The question I have is whether we need a policy to be drafted so that we can receive additional federal funds and that we have an expressed program that satisfies their requirements so that we could get new funds. And that's part of this discovery work to do. Outside of that, Commissioner Sterrett, I would agree that that is absolutely the beauty in partnering with these other agencies and organizations that already administer programs, whether it's the COG or CDIF or another partner. It does take that administrative burden away from us. It's more a matter of what can we commit and what does that commitment look like via a program.
And then Ken wants to add something. Sean.
And we do have an agreement with COG for the revolving loan program, but it's specific for the revolving loan program. So anything new, we would have to be in conversations with Council of Governments to, I don't believe this, it could be within the scope of work, but it looks like this is really for managing the revolving loan program. And strictly that. I mean, so we do have an agreement. We renew this every year.
Yeah, and certainly one of the things that I'm glad Abishai brought up, and we mentioned that to get the partners, SEDCOR, regional solutions, especially regional solutions, the counties that are actually have that money with COG that are saying the same thing, we can't use it because it's not, to work on that where the government will release that money for the counties to use as they deem fit in any kind of, that'd be economic development, because there's $500,000. And I'd rather use that money because we have 500,000 sitting there we can't really use.
Right. Okay. Would Abishai be able to work with, or just contact COG to find out about whether or not that is in the scope of work of our revolving loan? Is that something that you could let us know? Abishai?
Yes, absolutely. I've already been in contact with the Council of Governments regarding a little bit of a brainstorming, kind of getting confirmation about what's going on in that program. As I mentioned, Carrie Martin reached out and was also participating in those conversations. So I would say that that is definitely in the scope of work for SEDCOR to pursue. In addition, right, trying to identify if there's opportunities to free that money up. My request on staff time for item number 2 on my cover letter, the request for consideration, was really directed more towards some county staff time. So that might be your grants and special projects manager. It might look like something else, but I do need a conduit to the county. I might need some support from Christian or others, and I know I'm not sure what your current work schedule, workload, looks like, and whether everybody is active. So I wanted to just put in there that I will need some staff support from the county. To answer your question simply, Commissioner Sterrett, yes, that definitely falls under the purview of the work that SEDCOR is already engaged in doing for the county.
So Ken, I guess it would basically be coming back to us and letting us know, does it look like there's any bandwidth? I know with County Council's office, we know where they're at. And with your office, I guess it comes down to whether grants and special projects has any wiggle room in it.
I'll look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
And obviously, we will make it work, right? If this is a priority for the board, we'll make sure it gets done.
Well, it's a priority for me. And just to put this, a kind of a generic comment that when we get through the public health response, we can be part of a robust economic recovery response. So, and this seems to be a good component of it, to have loans that are accessible, right, to people who have businesses that are really important to our community members.
Yeah, and it's the accessible part that I want to
That's-
make sure is key here.
I'm with you there. Yeah. Well, okay.
No, I was just going to say, so would this be something that we would just come back with that information from our county administrator and then come back and say, okay, we've got these pieces, we can go ahead and put something in motion?
Yeah. Do you think, this is the immediate grant program is, kind of as soon as possible. Abishai's timeline, I believe, includes asking for them to essentially start work on it shortly after the 1st of April, But that gives
So
us,
that worked.
that gives us until next week to say go, I think. All right,
Commissioner
so
Kula, can I interrupt with
Oh.
clarification?
please.
So the timeline that I offered for the grant program was basically to suggest that we could gear up and start offering out that grant program as early as April 6th.
Okay.
So looking at, could we get the link online? Could we get the announcement made? Could we get communication out to the individual cities? Also, another partner I should mention is McMinnville Economic Development Partnership is a really strong partner in that communication component, so I would be leaning into them as well. But basically suggesting that if the funds were available and if everything were signed off on, because the fact that the county already has a grant program structure, we could initiate it very quickly.
Mhm. Well, perhaps one way of moving forward is to say that we want Abisha to move forward on it, and that we don't yet have the. Do we? Are we comfortable with a number, or do we want to wait until next week for a total dollar value? But it sounds like we're all wanting to give direction to Abisha, especially about the immediate grant. Sorry.
The only thing I'm concerned about is the being able to repay wherever we take the money from. So I think that since we don't have a dollar figure, that we could say that generally there's consensus, we want to move forward, but we need some specifics, maybe even just a ballpark.
If you waited till next week to do that, you could adopt it on the 2nd, and then you could have it go into effect as soon as the following Monday, which would be the 6th, which is at the end of her preferred timeframe, but that would give you a little over a week.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Chair
much
Chair
time-
Kula,
how
can
much
I
time
interrupt again?
Ken needs.
But if I'm.
Ken's gonna say something.
If I'm hearing correctly, it sounds like there is consensus to do this grant program. It's just not sure what that dollar amount could be. So,
Mhm.
for direction for Abisha could start getting everything in place, but we won't have a final number on what's available. I mean, because she
Right.
could start doing the work and preparing everything to release and advertise. It's just won't have that dollar amount yet that's going to be available until next week.
That's a good point.
And
Abisha, did she? Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure because she was trying to say something to clarify. Abisha?
Yeah, I was, thank you. And I know I'm raising my hand over here, but y'all can't see it. I can see you. So I think Ken just touched on what I was looking for clarification on, because if we need to wait until next week, which certainly I respect, for the board to be able to make decisions about the funding amount, so long as I had a thumbs up, if you will, to pursue setting up the website with access to an application that we develop and could start to prepare the announcement, that would be very helpful in keeping that timeline as tight to the proposed timeline as possible.
And the staff time component too,
Mhm.
because without that, how do we go forward?
Well, I think the loan,
Correct.
right. And can we return to that part of it on next Thursday, but while still allowing Abisha to move forward on the immediate grant?
Yeah, I think the immediate grant, I have less concern with, because like Abisha was saying, it's going to be, based on what we already have an existing grant program that they've worked on. So that was something that Carrie Martin was already going to be working on with Abisha. So it's something, it's anything new that I'm trying to be sensitive to, where we may need to redirect resources. And we're going to have to keep some flexibility with the current COVID issue. I'm just sensitive to the all hands on deck for being able to respond to things as needed.
For basic operations in the county.
Correct.
Yes, I think the part of the question is, and I think Abisha put it very well, is with the consensus that the work she needs to do in setting up the webpage and everything, even though we might not know what that funding amount is, there's nothing stopping. I mean, we're by consensus, that we agree with it, and that we shouldn't put any delay in the things she needs to do on her end to get it started. We just don't know what the funding number will be yet.
Yeah.
Does that require a motion?
I think it's direction to staff or,
I think it's consensus, I
It's
think.
consensus.
I don't
Is
Okay.
it clear
that's-
that this is within the scope of their existing, SEDCOR's existing work under our agreement? If it is, then I don't think we need to do anything.
Oh,
Okay.
okay,
Yeah, I think it is. That's why I said consensus, because I don't think.
Yeah,
it
yeah.
needs-
okay.
And I
Well-
think because we haven't set a dollar amount that's available, I think that would require a motion that, we're going to take amount X from ONC fund and apply it to this.
Yeah.
We would want to do that
Yeah.
at that point.
and I do, I appreciate the availability of the ONC funds for that. I think that this is very much within the spirit of the ONC of keeping businesses thriving in the county. Yeah.
And most ONC counties
Mhm.
use their ONC funds for exactly things like this.
Okay.
Because they get the income, through PILT and SRS.
Yeah.
They get the income, but it's not required that they use those funds on only forestry type things or
Right.
ONC County related issues. So
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I realize this was a really extensive conversation, but I really appreciate, given that it's something that's totally new, I really appreciate engaging in it. So,
And it's nice that we have the infrastructure with SEDCOR to be able to just pick this up quickly and go ahead.
agreed.
benefits.
Okay. Any further questions or comments for Abhisha?
Thanks, Abhisha.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Abhisha.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners and staff. On behalf of myself, SEDCOR, and the business community in Yamhill County, not only do we appreciate your commitment to trying to support our economy and being as strong as it can be on the back end of this, but I sincerely appreciate your commitment to showing up in person and making sure that county business is still moving forward. So thank you for your time and your consideration of the proposal.
Thanks, Abhisha.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Abhisha.
Abhisha.
She's so good. I tell people that all the time.
Brownie points will get her every time.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Okay. And thank you, Ken, for helping provide some clarification around that. I appreciate it. We're moving on to item H, which is announcements. Finally.
I just have something briefly I want to say about
Yeah.
YCAP. As you know, they're the regional food bank. There are some concerns right now because they are not going to be able to make an appeal to local businesses, which is about a quarter of their revenue.
Yeah.
So because local businesses aren't going to be able to, so they're down that. There's a fundraiser that's not going to happen, the Raise the Barn fundraiser. So that's $60,000 they're not going to have. The Dustin Court situation really did take a bite out of the budget, took a toll on the YCAP budget. The other thing is they've been going around to food stores and restaurants and being able to get some food. That's not going to happen anymore because food is at a premium. So YCAP is really going to be hard pressed to be able to just continue to serve folks. So I want you to keep that in mind. Youth outreach, there's no street outreach for these kids. They used to go around and make contact with kids. There's none of that going on. The drop-in center is closed. So this is just something that is going to impact our community. Also, just an update on Housing Authority. The Norton property is the environmental impact study is being done right now, and that's a project that's moving forward. And let's see. And the Dayton House. So the Dayton House that we haven't been able to go look at, the rehab, which is the county foreclosure, that is going to be marketed to clients who meet the income level for $270,000. The market appraisal is $300,000. So this is one of those things that's going to be, again, it will first be marketed to Housing Authority clients, and then if there are no takers, they'll go ahead and include other people in that, but the house will be for sale.
That's nice. What they've done with that house.
Yeah.
And then,
So-
Mike, a question for you kind of along similar lines, because I don't know how it works yet, but I was hoping to listen in to the Zoom meeting this afternoon that I know that you were going to attend.
Which one?
Is it the mission one? Oh, right. Actually, I have to clarify. I have 3 also.
There's
so.
Northwest Seniors is
Great.
at 1:30. Then there's the other one. Last I heard was that we didn't have
I'm not sure if there's a time yet.
I don't think there is.
Okay.
I
I know that Director Manfred was available as of 3:30. So,
Right.
and so I thought, well, I
haven't
think
seen
it would
I
work.
haven't seen
It
done.
wouldn't be a public meeting if I just listened and you participated. That's what I was thinking. Because it's not noticed. That's the only thing.
You know, because with not having the informal session,
Yeah.
the one thing that we're missing is we do
Calendar.
our weekly calendaring.
Yeah.
And I think from this point going forward, I think it's going to be really important to maybe communicate. Christian can weigh in on if commissioners are, because typically in an abundance of caution, we've always noticed that if a couple of commissioners are going to an event,
Yeah.
that it's noticed, and so the public's aware that a majority of the board
Yeah.
is attending an event. With all these webinars, live cast call-ins, and things that are happening, we're in kind of new territory that we not necessarily have been before. And I'm going to look at Christian about noticing requirements.
Well, I mean, we've had a couple of these meetings already, I think, where, for example, you had a Zoom meeting, and I think one or another of the commissioners might have been observing or attending, but not actually participating
sure.
in or leading the meeting.
Yeah.
That's not a problem.
Okay.
Similar to this meeting today, if you're on the board or if you are a member of the committee who's there on behalf of the county, or if you're just observing and listening,
Mhm.
I don't think it's a problem
Yeah.
if two of you do that, as long as you're not discussing or deliberating towards a decision on a matter that's designated to come before the board.
Okay.
So
Because I
similar
just
to
thought
if
that
you
you're
went to a
so involved that I thought, oh, well, I want to know what's happening, but I'm
Similar
just
to if you
fine
went to a
listening.
social event or something where, like we've done in the past, we've noticed those things and we can continue to
Yeah.
try to do those if we know about them ahead of time. I don't think it's not going to be anything where we're running afoul of a public meetings law.
Okay.
And I don't know that it's going to happen,
That's
actually. There was one email led me to believe that this might be premature.
Oh, okay.
So I'm waiting to see. But again, this just happened. This
Yeah.
isn't something that we
Yeah.
could have noticed.
No, exactly.
But I think it's just informational at this
I
point.
think so too.
So I don't,
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that I brought it up so that
yeah,
And
in abundance of caution.
I agree,
Sorry.
Christian. It's always been my feeling that and we've noticed a lot of this because of transparency, people knowing what we're doing. But unless we're conducting county business and will lead to a deliberation or a discussion.
Yeah, as long as you're not convening the governing body for the purposes of discussion or deliberation.
So
Okay.
all
Now,
three
you-
commissioners could be on it.
As a reminder, you might all be at an event sometime somewhere, and someone might pose a question. Hey, well, is this something that's coming over the board, and what do you think you're going to do about it? Well, that's the kind of question where you say, if that becomes a topic, it'll be on the agenda, and we'll discuss it at that meeting. And you should avoid answering or getting into a discussion about those sorts of issues in that
Yeah.
context. But yeah.
Okay.
Other than that, I think
Great, thank you.
the difficulty is we don't have the scheduling and the calendaring
Mm-hmm.
to be able to put out as many of these notices as we have before.
And I saw the email not that long ago. So.
Now,
But
that
also,
being said, we could talk about it right now if folks know there are going to be things coming up.
the other thing would be is emailing Carrie Hinton.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And just in an abundance of caution, if there's something that,
Yeah.
if we want to follow that, I'm trying to kind of limit, so if we don't need to do calendaring, but at
Yeah.
the same time, it'd be great if you just email Carrie and
Still
she can
putting
get
out
it
the
on the
weekly-
calendar.
Still putting out the joint weekly
Yes, we are.
schedule, right?
Yeah.
And
Okay,
maybe
great.
take a look at that, and if there's any changes, updates, but also recognizing that a lot of events aren't happening or have been canceled or doing it remotely.
So a lot of the problems with these call-ins like that, you don't really have time. I mean, you might find out at 10 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
might be 11:30. It's not going to do much good to notify Carrie.
But I appreciated being on the call
challenge.
with you, with the governor. So,
thank you.
yeah. Okay. Thank you. That was the only thing I wanted to bring up.
The only thing I want to bring up is just one thing, it actually has to go back to SEDCOR. I forwarded you, because it didn't look like you got it, the latest EDAC work that EDAC's doing, a slide presentation in PDF format on economic development in Yamhill County. It talks about Yamhill County trends, natural trends. There's a chart in there that shows you what the traded sectors are in Yamhill County, the non-traded sectors, and what the average, how many employees in that sector and what the average wage per employee in that sector is. So you'd be surprised. There's a lot of people out there working that aren't making a lot of money. So, but I thought if you go through that, it'll really be awakening to you.
Yeah.
you.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. Kenny, do you have anything to add? That's why I'm smiling. Christian, do you have anything to add?
I don't think so.
Okay, Carolina. Okay, thank you for manning the YouTube.
You did a good job.
Okay, with that, we before we adjourn, I just want to note that Carolina gave us some counsel about a little pause, a little lag. So with that, I will adjourn this meeting.
Thank you.
Remember.